welcome back from lunch. We believe that today, this session is going to actually be the most exciting session yet, right? We go from glory to glory, and the afternoon session is going to be filled with glory, right? So while we have Chris and Ben and Dana here, why don't we just give it up for them, the fathers and the prophetic to us. We're going to take the next hour or so, and we just really want to ask questions and glean as much as we can from these fathers. Panel, the first question I've got is, what was the time frame from when you felt called to be a prophet to when you actually stepped into the office of a prophet? Ben.
Okay. For me, my call was actually came in a dream. And it just briefly, where God was sitting in the driver's seat of my car, we were parked, and God said, "Hey, here comes your dad." And Chris Valentin walked out of the forest, and there was this whole exchange that happened, and in the dream, and so this happened.
Out of the forest.
Yeah, out of the forest. So this happened, and at that point, I was actually building homes in the Bay Area and had no real connection with Chris. And I can remember calling him at that point and said, "Hey, I had this dream. Do you know what it means?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, are you going to tell me?" He said, "No." And so that was it. And it was 7 years later, I actually came on staff in school of ministry, in first year school of ministry. And then 7 years after that, where I actually came on as the prophetic ministries director of the church and school here. And so really that's 14 years of process. I think it can be faster, but I made a lot of mistakes on the way. And
Nah.
I had, this is in the prophetic company book, so I'll just give the short version, but I had that epiphany in Fiji where the Lord called me to raise up, change the sound of worship in nations and raise up revivalists and so forth. But I didn't really know what that was. And then a few years later, Chris asked me if I would help him start the School of Prophets. I said, "Well, I'm happy to help you, but I'm not a prophet." And he goes, "Well, don't you call up the leaders of nations and, in worship and all that kind of stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, that's a prophet. Shut up and just do it." And he did. And but I thought he just loved me, to tell you the truth. I thought he was just being affirming. For the first 3 years of teaching the School of the Prophets, I didn't actually believe I was one. And then we had James Gall come.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know why I believed him and not you, Chris, but forgive me. But in the very first meeting that year in the School of the Prophets, James said, "Dano, stand up. The Lord says you're a prophet after the order of Asaph, restoring the Levitical priesthood in the land and raising up the tabernacle of David in nations around the world." And blah, blah, blah. And he defined exactly what the Holy Spirit had told me about 6 or 7 years earlier. And so it took me a while to believe what the prophets were saying and what the Lord was saying. And then I also felt like it was going to be, incredibly different after I realized, oh, I'm a prophet, I'm in the office of a prophet. And honestly, it just felt the same. It didn't feel any different at all. I was still doing the same things I was doing. But I know that there are times when I actually...
Except for the name on your door.
Kick in, in my business cards,
Prophet,
my promotional materials.
Prophet Dano.
Yeah, exactly. But I know there's times when I actually have to shift gears and say, "Hey, right now I'm not speaking as your friend, I'm speaking as a prophet." Or right now I'm not just sharing a message, I am giving you a prophetic word. And I think that was the part that was different for me. But it was about 7 years kind of in the realization process.
Good.
How about for you, Chris?
Oh, I shared my story.
Okay. This is a question for all three of you. For those of us that are in the process, we've had the calling, but we haven't stepped into the office. Do you have one tip that you would share on how to go through that process successfully? How about we start with you, Chris?
I think between the promise and the palace is also always the process. and I was in a meeting with the conference with Mark Sharona, and he said, you know that verse Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you. He said the Hebrew word is not plan, it's purpose. He said God doesn't have a plan for your life. He has a purpose, and he has 500 plans to get you there. Wow. And that was really beautiful, and it's actually true. You know, have you ever used your GPS and you hear recalculating?
Yeah.
So I think that you get to determine the plan by your attitude and your receptivity. And for instance, I think when Joseph realized that he was supposed to be a ruler of the world, the worst thing he could have done was go out and tell his jealous brothers that he was going to rule them. But he decided the plan when he decided that he was going to be arrogant. So he went from the promise right to the prison. And I don't think he had to go to prison, but I think his attitude determined that. So I think there's, if you figure out a way around the process, you can't stay in the palace. And that's the story of Saul. God was grooming David, but the people called for a king.
Yeah.
And so Saul I have a lot of mercy for Saul, a lot of compassion for Saul, because I'm like, Saul didn't want the kingship. He wasn't trying to promote himself. Yeah. He didn't even have great self-esteem. In fact, when Samuel anointed him king, he was anointed right there with a horn of oil. But when the people tried to anoint him king, he was hiding in the luggage. Mm-hmm. So he didn't ask to be king. It kind of got put on him. But the challenge with Saul is that he never had a process. There was no process. He was in the kingship probably 10 years too early.
That's it.
And so when you have the weight of governing without the process, you have the responsibility of governing without the process that it takes to build capacity. It's often ends in a train wreck. I was sharing in my breakout session, one of the worst things leaders can do is go, we need the fivefold ministry. Who's our most prophetic person?
Right.
Okay, there's the prophet. Do we have anyone who actually leads people to Christ? There's our evangelist.
Yeah.
And in the book of Revelation, chapter 2, Jesus said to John about the church of Ephesus, you test those who say they are apostles and are not. It's pretty important that we don't give titles to people that actually don't have the call, because we promote them without protection, and we put weight on them that they don't have capacity to carry. So that's what I think.
That's a great answer, Chris. Thank you. Dana, what about for you? What would be one tip you would share about how to be successful in the process?
I think I meet so many people that are looking for people that are called to be a prophet, and they're looking for a mentor who's a prophet. That's probably the worst thing you could do, because you know about your gift. Usually your deficiencies aren't in the area of your giftedness. Your deficiencies are usually in another area. The best worship mentor I ever had didn't sing or play an instrument. He just knew people and the ways of the Spirit. And he mentored me more in worship than any musician that I'd ever met. And I think one of the things is that we get this tunnel vision that says, because I'm called to be a prophet, I need a prophet to be my mentor. Actually, no, you probably need a mentor in the areas you're weak, not in the areas you're strong, to help coach you into a healthier, place in life. As really a person, sometimes it's your people skills that need work, or your character skills, your business skills, your home skills, your life skills, whatever. And so I think a lot of people cut themselves off from what they actually need by looking for a mentor who is like them.
It's interesting that Philip in the Bible, the only named evangelist, the only person who's ever named evangelist in the entire Bible, Philip had 4 daughters who were prophetesses. Isn't it interesting that they were fathered by an evangelist? In other words, you can father a different gift. And I would add that it's important to have prophetic influence in your life.
Yes. Yeah.
It's important to watch other people. It's important to come to places like this where there's an intensive, where you're being influenced by prophets.
Yes.
But so I would say having other people influence you is great.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the most important seasons of my life was actually being hired as a school and ministry pastor. Now, that's not my natural default to pastor people. but I learned a value system for process and for people. And I was so futuristic, I was just trying to give them the answers. I'm like, oh, I know how to fix you. Here, bam, I'm going to fix you. Bam, bam, bam. And then I never had a value system for the process. I just wanted to give a good word. Yeah. And that's killing a bunch of people from actually becoming powerful. And it killed me from actually being a great leader and valuing another portion of the fivefold that we actually vitally need. And so it helped me fall in love with different types of people that weren't like me.
Those are beautiful. So we hear a lot of times about the high victories and the amazing words that prophets give. Could you also share with us what has been your greatest challenge as being a prophet, and how have you overcome that? Dana, could you start us off with that? It might be this question. The greatest challenge may be this question right here.
I need a minute on that one. Does somebody ready to go?
The greatest challenge? People. Wouldn't the church just be a beautiful place if there wasn't people in it? No, I think that warfare. I would say warfare. That's why I wrote the book on spirit wars, because of my own life. It's actually a book about my own life, much of it. And so I think that, you know, the best thing that ever happened to me, besides obviously meeting Jesus and marrying my wife, but the best thing that ever happened to me outside of that was, you know, meeting Bill Johnson. And having someone who maybe didn't totally understand the prophets, but definitely had a high value for the prophets, and also had a very stable life, and had, you know, 5 generations of wisdom. Yeah. And I'll tell you, the first, many years, but the first 10 years of meeting Bill, I felt like I was hooked up to a fire hydrant, and I felt like I had capacity for it. Like, just give me everything you have, you know, and I would do anything just to be with Bill. So like 5 days a week, we were a lot slower then. You know, we didn't have all this business, all this stuff we're doing now. But we were probably, our families together, our families were probably together 5 days a week. And I just learned so much. But, you know, I've crashed majorly twice in my life. One when I was 22, and another time about 9 years ago. So those have been very dark times in my life, and I'm learning how to come out of those times. So yeah, I think that prophets, they do have things in common. Like that the fact that we kind of, like everybody has spiritual warfare. Everybody does. But I don't know if I can say this, metaphorically speaking, sometimes it's easier to be ignorant. So you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but you're like blind and deaf. Mm-hmm. It's like, you don't actually know you're about to die. Yeah. But prophets, we get HD, 3D, beautiful color. And
you hear the background music.
And we hear the background music. And so it's like, we're all going to die. It's like, so it works great when when the Lord's speaking to us. But the thing is like it's kind of like, I do think it's a really great metaphor. It's like we have this big screen TV that's 3D, yep. And like we see everything on it. So, so I think sometimes we tend to be, the spirit world can be pretty intense for us because we see it, we feel it, we taste it, we're in it. And it's, one of the things I've learned, but I'm learning. How many know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I learned it, but then next time I go through a trial, I'm like, oh, I don't have it down as much as I. Yeah. But I'm learning to, be able to dial down, turn the TV down. Let's turn the TV down and let's turn the color off, And it's okay to not be dialed all the way up and have the sound all the way up all the time, And so what I've learning in my late 50s and now early 60s is it's okay to dial that down. It's okay to not be intense and all the time, and it's okay to just. I've always been a person who has lots of fun, but I feel like it's sanctioned. It's like, that's good. Yeah, just chillax. Yeah. It's all right. You're gonna do this. So those are some things I've kind of learned.
Can I ask you just a follow-up question, Chris? You talked about dialing down. Are there any other tactics you utilize so you're not overwhelmed by spiritual warfare in your life?
Well, frankly, I have seasons where I can't watch certain television shows and seasons when I can. I have seasons where I can't have certain kinds of entertainment. Now, I'm not talking about anything sexual or anything like that. I'm just talking about like intensity when I already have a war going on feeds the thing inside me. So there's like I like NCIS or I like war movies and all that. I can't watch any of that stuff when I'm going through a season. Yeah. And now I've realized like feeling weird about not being able to watch that. I don't even think about that. Like, we won't be watching that. Let's find something funny on TV,
Yeah, exactly.
Let's, things like that, and just like, making sure. I'll tell you another thing. If you don't sleep, it will make you crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not it might. It will make you crazy. You will act schizophrenic if you don't sleep. And I'm telling you, a lot of times, prophetic people, they'll come and they're like, I'm having all this warfare at night and da-da-da. I'm like, how long has it been since you've slept?
Yeah.
I haven't slept in 2 weeks. It's not a spirit. It's chemistry. I'm telling you that body chemistry will mirror demonic attacks. And it will have nothing to do with demons.
Yeah.
If you don't, just think about it. You go take LSD, it affects your mind, right? It's body chemistry, right? Heroin, it affects your body chemistry. I'm telling you, if your serotonin gets off, and typically by not sleeping, it'll make you crazy. And you will see things and hear things and feel things, and it's like you just need some rest. So I because I crossed over that line twice in my life, many years ago and then 9 years ago, I realized that if I start to feel anything weird, I'm talking about weird like sometimes you were talking about something in a good way, but I have if I don't get enough rest, I start to watch myself. Like I'll be sitting here and I'm watching myself, and I'm like, I don't think it's a positive thing. Right. I think it's a chemistry thing. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. If I go sleep, and if I get an 8-hour night's sleep, it goes away. And I'm like, that's something to do with the way my mind processes. That my mind right now is not healthy because I haven't enough rest. Yeah. And so, so prophetic people oftentimes get wakened in the night. I'm like, okay, if you're not sleeping at night, take naps during the day. But your brain, I'm talking about your organ of your brain needs sleep. Yeah. And I have seen so many people tell me they're under demonic attacks, and it almost, I would say 60% of the time, they haven't slept. And they get sleep, and sometimes, and I'll tell you this, I hope this is okay, but if you have to take sleeping pills to sleep for a season, I'd rather do that than be crazy. And I'm not promoting sleeping pills. I'm just saying, if there's no other way to sleep, you have to sleep.
Absolutely.
Good answer. How about for you, Ben? What has been an obstacle for you or a challenge for you, and how have you overcome that?
Pride and arrogance. Pride and arrogance, I think, are some of the biggest killers of people who can see the future, because we think we have the answers, or we think we see the total picture, and then the old school isolation that we learned, coupled with pride and arrogance, that I know the answer, I have a relationship with God, has just murdered me. I mean, just absolutely set me up for the worst decisions and choices, and I never had a heart to actually choose sin. But with pride and arrogance, coupled with thinking I hear from God and not inviting anyone else in my life, and because I hear from God, I'm in the light, but I'm living in the darkness, and I'm lying to myself all throughout this, and that allows compromise in my life, not sin, but compromise. And then I've got little hidden compromise in my life, which eventually are pebbles in my garden that create a pathway if I never deal with them. And I don't see them as something bad. It's not a sin, it's okay. And now I'm telling myself, and I'm saying how it's okay to have these things. Meanwhile, all of a sudden I look up and I've been walking on a path of pebbles of compromise, and I can't even find my garden. And I'm actually choosing sin in my life and ruining everything that I thought I was connected to.
You should get vulnerable so that pride thing won't come on you.
Maybe next year.
So Ben, how do you keep that out of your life or deal with it?
Here's the grace of God. The grace of God will give you grace to deal with your issue before it actually is exposed. But if you won't deal with it, then the grace of God will expose you. Because he loves you too much to leave you that way. And that's what happened to me is God exposed me to where I had to absolutely deal with the sin issues that I had now partnered with because of compromise, pride, and arrogance, not listening to anyone's voice, only surrounding myself with people who look like me, not valuing other giftings, all of those things. And then I had to choose every day to actually deal with my issue and be real and have people impart into my life and not run away. You know, my wife's like, hey, why don't we move? And then we'll just deal with it. I said, yeah, we move, and guess what? We don't feel pain anymore, and we don't ever deal with the issue anymore. I said, the only time we move from a place when I've created a mess is after I clean it up. If I've cleaned up the mess fully and I've dealt with the issue in my heart and I've set up healthy around me and now I have healthy relationships and the right things feeding in my life, now I can move on, but I don't move on before that.
So just that you share this publicly a lot. So you ended up in an adulterous relationship while you're on staff.
Yeah.
And you...
An affair.
An affair, yeah. And you ended up walking through repentance. Stayed on the team in an admin role.
Yep.
Submitted yourself to the process. I think this is important. Submitted yourself to the process. Yeah. Got your marriage healed up, which was
absolutely
right.
Yeah, Danny Silk at the very beginning, he asked me this. He says, "What does it look like to come back from this?" And I said, "That wasn't even on my grid. Like that wasn't even in my mind." I'm like, "Well." I never come back from this unless I have my wife and my kids. Like, if I don't win them, then you don't come back to ministry like that. It just doesn't do it. And Dan Fairley actually asked me a crazy question. He said, you know what, some people are called to the ministry, but some people don't have the capacity for it. You need to ask yourself if you have the capacity to be in this type of environment. And that was big, and that was my process. And I never wanted to come back in too early.
Yeah. And so Ben just did a beautiful job of actually immediately coming to a place of repentance, kind of like the David and Nathan thing. Yep. When he was exposed, he immediately repented, walked through more than a year process with our teams, submitted him.
Yeah, an actual counseling for 4 years straight.
Yeah. And then we slowly... as we felt like he was healthy as a team, brought him slowly back into a place of ministry, and now he leads all our prophetic team. So we're very, very proud of Ben.
And guess what? My wife and I have the best relationship. We know how to communicate to one another. We value each other's voice. She absolutely loves me and trusts me in this environment. And I set up healthy boundaries to make her feel awesome. Yeah. And guess what? She can tell me, I don't know if I feel good about you having that meeting today. Great, I don't need to have it. Totally. And so those are all beautiful things.
It's good. I think mine was probably more the anachronistic thing.
Could you further explain that?
Get you right there.
That thing of seeing the future more real than now.
Just will screw up a perfectly normal person.
Seeing things out of time is all I mean. And because honestly, it just gets frustrating all the time.
Oh, you were serious?
I am serious.
Oh, I thought you were teasing. Sorry.
I kept seeing people in their greatest potential. I'd put them in positions of power. They would fail. They'd be mad with me. I'd be mad with them. And it's because, again, I wasn't seeing the process to their potential, like you mentioned. But also, like, even with our leadership team, I would share things with our leadership team, and they wouldn't see what I was seeing. I'd go away, get frustrated, get quiet. And I learned that what I had to do was present it a different way about every 6 months. is I'd share it, and then I'd come back 6 months, I'd share it again, but in a little bit different way. And then 6 months later, I'd share it again in a different way. And I had a very slow-moving leadership team too, as Chris knows. But then what would usually happen is at some point, one of the other team leaders would present it as their idea.
Yeah, of course.
And then you have to say, brilliant.
It's like when people bring you a book to endorse and you read the book and it's your stuff with their name on it.
Yeah, I had that happen too. But that thing of being willing to invest in the process and being willing to invest in real time. And I think sometimes when you see a better future, it's really easy to get frustrated with the now rather than celebrate what's good about the now and work within that process toward the better future that you see. And I think the difference between a protester and a reformer is that a protester stands outside the gate shouting what's wrong, and a reformer enters into the process and works with what is right and helps develop a vision and a pathway for something different. And I really understood that I had to commit to being a reformer and not a protester by entering into the process and really celebrating what was good about the now.
That's so good. That's so good.
That anachronistic thing gets me every time too. Just wanted to add that.
I think one of the things I know I love about this conference are the community groups, but also just seeing you all interact together. And could you just share with us like some keys for you on how you've put the right people in your life? Like maybe you could start us off, Dano. You talked a little bit about mentors in your life. Could you expand a little bit about how you put yourself in a position of success by the people around you?
I think for me, it is a matter of trusting their voice and trusting their input and valuing it at times above my own. That's probably been the hardest thing to learn and the most valuable thing to learn is that there's people I've invited into a place in my life so that when they bring input, really valuing their input, even if I think they're wrong, and treating it as though they're right and I'm wrong until I can sort it out, rather than defending my position or reacting to what they're saying. I think that's probably been the best piece that I've learned there.
I think, you know, we've talked about it several times. You made some comments since we've been here in this. But finding people who are different than you and inviting them into your life is the wisest, smartest thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I find I have to find people I enjoy being with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I'm going to work with people all the time, you know, you just there's people you have chemistry with and there's people you don't. I don't really want to work with somebody, I'm talking about on any kind of a regular basis, that I don't really enjoy being with. But even more important than enjoying being with them, they have to, for me, I look for people that have a different gift than me or a different strength. It doesn't even have to be like a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
And I like to draw those kind of people in. And I feel like really healthy teams are when you have people that are diverse, same core values and same vision. Yeah. Like that's the best. And I think that one of the things that we work hard to do, I don't know if I'm perfect at it, but is helping people to feel powerful. So when they're on the team, they have a voice. And we say everyone has an equal voice, but not everybody has an equal vote. And so when we do things, we do it together. Everybody, even our team, the school ministry team, I think it's 52 people. When we make a major decision, everybody's in the room. We give people a chance to talk about it, listen to everybody, but then somebody has to make the final decision, so we move forward. But I really enjoy hiring different kinds of people or bringing different kinds of people on the team. I really enjoy having women on my team. I think my team's probably, our bigger team's probably at least 60% women. Yep. They have a different perspective, especially on the prophetic teams. They tend to be more sensitive and intuitive. And on the prophetic teams, and compassionate. Sometimes, especially in the area of prophetic, they tend to be, and I know I'm stereotyping, I'm probably going to be sorry that I did this, but they tend to be a little bit better leaders in the prophetic ministry because they tend to be more compassionate and a little bit slower to act. And so I like that. and I like that I'm such an alpha male. I think it's really good to have a female perspective around you. It's like, you're killing everybody. I'm like, oh, I wasn't aware of that. Oh, that's what that, I thought that was a speed bump. I didn't know it was a dead person. So I really like having those different people around me. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, Jen said something when she was here when we interviewed her about having, mentors who are pouring into you and making sure you have that place in your life, making sure you have people that you run with in life and ministry who have a voice in your life as well, and then that you're pouring out into others. And how do you actually create a value system for people that aren't like you? That was really hard for me until I really grabbed a hold of Romans 8:19, all creation longs for the sons of God to be revealed. Well, I'm actually a created being. And that means in God's sovereignty, he actually reserved portions of himself to only be revealed in Steve-O here. Well, if that's true, and I want the fullness of God, which I do, which all prophets do, right? You want the fullness of God. Well, that means I got to value people because they have an attribute or aspects of God that I can only get through a relationship and a value system through them. And it actually forces me to look at a person not in what I don't like, but find what I do. How can we agree, and how can I build a bridge between that?
That's good, Ben.
That's good.
I'm going to interject here and introduce another question. And Dano, if I could direct this at you. Some of us come from churches that are not, the word prophetic is a foreign word. What would you recommend to us?
Those aren't real churches.
Yeah.
Oh.
You should leave those monuments and move into something real.
Please delete
Okay,
that
Dano,
from
go
the
ahead and give your
transcript.
answer.
Chris, your
Delete that
mic's
from the
on.
transcript.
Your mic's on. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dano, and give the follow-up
Come
answer.
back, Holy Spirit. Actually, I learned this principle from Chris of customize, don't compromise. And sometimes all we need to change is our language. There's not a church in America that won't want to have a Bible study or a seminar or a group that's doing listening prayer or recognizing the voice of God, which is the prophetic. Yeah. So, we can change our language for people without compromising our values. And I have a friend who is I have a friend in Australia who's a Christian pop singer, and she goes into a lot of churches where a prophetic song wouldn't be appropriate, and she just changes her language. She'll go, "Hey, I just had a song idea. Would you guys like to hear it?" And they feel part of her creative process. They feel really excited. She sings a prophetic song over them. They all get touched and wiped out. And she prophesied over them, but she just called it a song idea. Mm-hmm. And it's like, let's don't make a big deal about this. Like, we can change our language to help bring people into a place of encounter with the prophetic that will match what they're saying. Daniel allowed himself to be called, to be renamed by the name of their gods. Mm-hmm. And I know Chris has told stories before where people ask him, "Are you a psychic?" And rather than correcting him, he goes, "Well, kinda, but not like you think," And it's just, it's not a compromise. It's not syncretism of mixing, the sacred and the secular, but it is a customization that allows people to come in.
That's a great answer.
So don't leave the evil institutions. By the way, I'm totally joking, right? I hope by the last day, you know that. I'm being funny.
There is a time to leave.
Oh, there is?
There is a time to leave.
Well, we shouldn't have said that.
Ultimately, you got to be in a place where you're
Don't
celebrated,
say it right
not
now.
tolerated.
I'm joking.
Why are we so stuck on the title or what we call it when we can just actually live out of the principles of what it is to be prophetic, which is encouragers? Like that we should, just all become the greatest Barnabas, like Chris was talking about, in your community. And pretty soon, everyone's going to be attracted to you, including your pastor. And they're going to ask you, where do you get this from? Can you tell me more? How do we create more of this in our church? I wish everyone was like you. And it's going to open up doors for you.
You know, yeah, I mean, most of us go to church, most folks go to church, 2 hours a week, or maybe you go to Sunday night. I mean, think about how big life is. I mean, so for 2 hours a week, you can't do your prophetic stuff. But I mean, life is bigger than that. Yeah. So, people ask all the time, like, my pastor doesn't believe in prophecy, won't let me prophesy. Well, that's just 2 hours a week. Yeah. Just chillax and, do what he needs you to do, and then listen to us the rest of the week. It's good.
Chris, as you are on a roll, I'd like to...
Yes, he is.
Dano always goes, "You're tired, don't talk."
Or sometimes I want to hear what you have to say when you're tired.
We were having dinner 2 nights ago, and he goes, "You're not opening. You're tired. You are not opening."
Unfiltered.
Unfiltered.
I told you the after lunch session was going to be entertaining.
Yeah, totally.
So Chris, one question we received is, can the fivefold offices be blended together in a person?
Well, now I'll tell you, and Deno may have a different opinion, because we have floated in and out of different opinions on this thing, and I don't know where you stand right now. No, I mean, well, it's okay. We don't have to.
I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, sure.
Bins in process.
You're so blended, you're confused, right?
Someone help me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I had a conversation with James Gall a while back, and we were talking about this very issue, like, can someone be an apostle and a prophet, or a pastor and a teacher, or I mean, can someone be the whole fivefold? I don't know, I've never even been asked that question, but lots of times there's a question of duality in calling. And my opinion is, first of all, I think Bill mentioned in his teaching the other night when he opened that oftentimes people will call him by something that he's not, and because he's receiving grace from another gift. And the way I see it is, in Weaverville, when sometimes you'd buy property and build a house, and then you figure out that it's all mostly wells outside of the town. It's wells. You have to dig a well. And oftentimes you can't get water. You can't get enough water. And so what you do typically is you go to your neighbor who's got a great well, and you would work out some deal with them. Like, hey, can I tap into your well? And maybe it's for a little bit of money or often not. And so, when you come to my house, if I've tapped into Daniel's living next to me and I tap into his well, and you come into my house and you take a shower or drink water, whatever, you don't know that I don't actually have a well on my property, because you have all the water you want. As long as I stay in relationship with Dano, you have all the water you want. Yeah. So I feel like one thing I'll say is, like, the way I see fivefold ministry is, like, people will say to me all the time, especially when I'm traveling, like, people call you a prophet, but you're actually an apostle. Well, I've never one time ever had God prophesy of an apostle, call me an apostle, talk to me personally about being an apostle, but many times a prophet. And I'm like, oh, they think I'm an apostle because I'm connected to Bill's well. I have apostolic grace flowing in me, and I actually operate like an apostle, even though my call is, my actual call, my identity is as a prophet. But I have grace flowing into my life. I have that color grace flowing into my life, and it gives me apostolic gifts. So I'm a very cultural transformer person, and yet that would actually be flowing from Bill. And so I think that more often, let me say it, this way. I would think more often it's actually you're in relationship with people, and the fivefold is working the way it's supposed to, and you're receiving grace from other people's gifts, and therefore you're ministering out of the color of grace that they are giving you. Mm-hmm. James Gall pointed out that before the Apostle Paul was called an apostle, he's in a group of 4 people who are called teachers. So he's saying Paul was a teacher and a prophet. I'm sorry, a teacher and an apostle, and he points out that Barnabas was an apostle, and he was named with a group of 3 prophets. Yeah. And so I guess there's a way to look at that, and Dano may have a different opinion. We've talked about it several times in many years. I don't know that you need to get super big about it. Like, I don't think it's a big deal. I say this, even if you have more than one call, you're going to have a primary. I really do believe you'll have a primary call. And I also think there's a misunderstanding about, like, I'm a prophet who teaches. We all know prophets. Dano and I know we're in a relationship with lots of prophets who can't teach. And the reason I say that is we think about who else to have join us here. And we're like, oh, Henry's a great prophet. He can't teach. And this is about teaching and impartation, right? You come here to learn. Yeah. It's like Henry can do it, but he actually can't teach it. So there's lots of prophets who can't teach, and we're both teaching prophets. I don't consider myself a fivefold teacher. I just consider myself a prophet who can teach. Because my main thing isn't teaching. My main thing is prophetic, imparting prophetic ministry, seeing the future, pulling communities together. That's what I open up for people. And so, some people might say, well, you're a prophet teacher. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me that much. I don't run around like, I think I probably said this in a session. I don't know if it was in a side session, though, in a breakout. Like, I don't like people reducing me to the prophet box. Yeah. I don't like that. Like, I actually don't like the title. I don't like the title because it makes me smaller than I am. Yeah. Because I don't feel like I'm just a prophet. I feel like I'm a father. I'm a leader. I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I have a really good entrepreneur gift. I'm really good with finance and money. I build things. I'm a builder. So when they go, oh, you're a prophet, I feel like, oh, no, I'm not just that. Yeah. And so, so I don't actually like the title, and I don't mean in an arrogant way. I don't like the title because the description reduces me. And I don't feel like I can be reduced just to that. I feel like there's other dimensions to me. So I always wonder when somebody, like, they'll introduce themselves, I'm Prophet Joe. In Africa, it's okay because I think that there's a different culture there, and I'm not being rude. I've been to lots of times to Africa, and that, this is Apostle Dan, and this is Prophet Ben, and I understand it's a cultural thing, and it doesn't affect me at all. But when you're in America and you're like, this is Prophet so and so, and Apostle so and so is going to speak at our conference, I'm like, yeah, I don't really like that because I not because I don't understand it, because you receive a prophet in the name of a prophet, then you receive the prophet's reward. But on the other side of it is, like, is that guy just a prophet? Like, does he have to tell everybody he's a prophet? Is there a reason why you have to, like, I'm a prophet? And yet there are appropriate places to actually, for you to identify yourself. I do know that. I just don't like to wear it as a big old tag. And I do feel weird outside the African culture, and again, and we could talk for 20 minutes why I think it's appropriate there, but outside the African culture, in normal European or American culture, and Asian culture too, I think it's kind of odd. I think it's awkward, and I think it's, I'll just say, this is my opinion, I think it's inappropriate. But you might have
I agree with all that.
Yeah.
I really do. Can I just say one thing?
As long as you don't disagree.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, I'm a good
we
son,
don't want
so I can
disagreeers
disagree.
on this couch, man.
Yeah. A lot of people are pursuing titles, and as long as you pursue a title, it will define you. If you pursue your passion, then you get to define whatever anyone else calls you. This is why Daniel, when he was titled something, he already knew his identity. He actually defined it as 10 times greater wisdom than all of these other guys, because he didn't live under the kind of box of what the title defines me as. He's like, no, I'm going to define that.
You notice
through
that,
my passion.
Let's see, correct me. I don't think Joseph or Daniel are ever called a prophet in the entire Bible.
No.
I think we looked at what they did and said, oh, that's a prophet.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was ever, I don't remember. I don't ever remember. Not for sure Daniel was
just
never
listed in the book of the prophets, but it doesn't say so. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cool.
Yep. I'd like to shift gears a little bit here. One of my favorite things, I work directly with all three of these men. One of my favorite things about them is I see the way their wives look at them. And each one of them has powerful, healthy wives. And so one question I have actually for all three of you is, how do you balance having a successful ministry and a successful family? Daniel, why don't you start us off?
Well, because I oversee a missions organization, I travel about 6 months a year for the last 18 years. And so 2 weeks a month. And So every year, my family has a meeting over my schedule, and they look at the calendar. And we say, hey, how do you feel about this year? Are you guys up for it? Because it's never been my ministry. It's always been our ministry. And we've owned it as a family together. And so they feel part of the ministry, and they also feel part of the sacrifice. Like, this is what we do to touch the world. And they know they can come with me anytime. They can travel with me if they choose to. And all my kids have traveled with me individually, and my wife travels with me. But she has a call to the local church that we really, really celebrate and try to spend time empowering as well. But in that meeting, they can say, hey, we feel like that's too much, and I'll cut it back. Or, hey, we don't feel good about this place, and we'll cut it back, or we'll cut it out. And then in addition to that, so we do that once a year with my schedule, but then also everyone in my family has veto power in any situation. So I can be heading to the airport with the ticket in my hand, and if my 11-year-old daughter comes to me and says, I really need you to stay home, it's over. We'll just send somebody else, cancel this meeting. I'm not going to gain the world and lose my family. And so they know that they have that. They know that they have that power. So I think in 18 years they've used it 3 times. So they haven't felt the need to use it, but they always knew they had the power to use it. And then we have a date night as well and a family night, and we prioritize those times together. So I think also, though, what Chris said about learning to be present when you're home, and it is a skill you have to learn, especially when you come off a real high conference where, like, we just had some amazing meetings in Russia, and some blind eyes opened, and this butterfly appeared and would land on me. And I mean, just crazy stuff happening. And then, coming home and mowing the grass and taking out the trash and playing Barbies with my daughter on the floor. It's like, that's a hard adjustment, to be honest, because you've got lines of people wanting to receive ministry and talk to you and all this kind of stuff, and now you're just dad, or you're just Dano, or you're just, and making that shift consciously and being present in that situation, which is, again, something I learned from Chris, has been really, really important.
We were driving to Vacaville years ago. I don't know, it had to be 15 years ago, and Bill, actually coming home from Vacaville, where Dano's church is, and Bill said, that passage that says a prophet is not without honor except for in his hometown? I said, yeah. He said, I think it's supposed to be that way. He said, I think everyone should have a place where they're just them.
Yep.
Where they're not honored as the woman of God or the man of God. They're just Chris. Yep. You're just Chris. And so I think that it's really important for us to, I mean, what I think about that is, I already shared it, like, if your call should benefit your family. Yeah. If it doesn't benefit your family, there's something wrong. You're not carrying it right. There's something wrong. And Bill said, he said, my family sacrificed for my call, but there has to be a benefit for their sacrifice. Yeah. And he talked about different things that his family got to experience because he had a call. For once, you just said, he said, I've traveled all over the world. I've taken my kids all over the world while they were teenagers. How many kids get to travel the world? My kids have stayed in nice hotels and, swam in some of the best pools in the world while I was in I mean, it's just like, you have to think of ways to make sure that my kids are benefiting from the sacrifice they're making. Yeah. And so, I think that's really big. And I think that if we think of the thermometer, the thermostat of our life is different, but the thermometer of our life is our family. Like, how is our family doing? That's how you're doing. Yeah. Now, I understand there's exceptions, so if you can just, hold that as a general statement. Like, I understand when you get teenagers, things happen, people have free will, but I'm saying, generally speaking, how your family's doing, that's how your ministry's doing.
Yeah. I did things with my schedule because I'm a department head, and I'm able to start early and then get done around the time that my kids get out of school. I actually purposely did that so I could pick my kids up for school, so I could be at their sporting events. I was sports dad. I went to everything. I was dance dad. I went to dance stuff. And, you only have one season of life to do those things. Chris has a great message around like prioritizing and recognizing seasons of your life and then pouring yourself into it. And for me, in this season of my life, because my kids still are at home, my son's like, he's moving on. He's got a full-time job now. But I have two daughters, and one's a freshman in high school. I have 4 years left of glory with them, and I want to enjoy every moment of that. So my travel schedule looks different. I only travel once a month, and nothing over 7 days. And I actually like it better if it's only like 3 days. And so
we all do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it takes 3 days to get where we're going.
I know.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
That's
I like
the problem.
it when it's in the States, but most of it's international. But I do that, and then I cultivate a relationship with my wife. So when I get home, this thing, I don't even have it on me. My team's sometimes frustrated because they know now, and I communicate to them, if you text me at night, I probably won't get to it till tomorrow.
Hey, back off.
Well,
You have a text from your wife here.
yeah, that's the one different. Stop it. So when I get home, I'm actually.
Hey Siri, what do you think about
I'm
that?
home. And my wife and I, we like to, in the evening times after dinner, we take a walk. We're just down the lane, and our kids are there, and we love our time with our kids, and we prioritize them. So I think just making your family time actually family time and recognizing it is ministry, and you should pour out your heart in that. When I was a school and ministry pastor, it was really hard because I'd come home and be all peopled out. And my wife would expect me to be on right then. I said, baby, if you could, I had to sit down with her. Could you give me 15 minutes? 15 minutes out in my garden with my plants. Let me just talk to the plants, hug a few trees, and then...
We're in California.
Let me just have that moment, and you'll get a better dad. You'll actually get better husband. My kids get a better dad if you just give me a few minutes to like decompress from a day of giving out, because I really want to give, but I want to give my best.
That's good, Ben.
That's pretty.
Good, Ben.
It's very anachronistic of you.
I love to celebrate my wife's interests and ministries and projects and stuff like that too. I love to stay home with the kids so she can go to a conference and stuff like that. And I try to take every Thursday morning off that I'm home to watch my grandkids and like prioritize the time that we do have to make it quality time.
It's good. We have 2 more minutes, and we do need to do this part on time because we got all that nighting to do.
Yep.
Can I ask you one more question, Chris?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as a prophet, I mean, you have so many words that are on, but I'm sure sometimes some of the words are off.
Some of Dano's.
Some of them. So
He cleans up Dano's mess all the time.
hypothetically speaking of other prophets,
Yes.
how do you just measure the health of your prophetic ministry?
Well, that's really good.
That is great.
Well, I think the health of your prophetic ministry is not just your prophetic words, of course, and we've had that conversation today. So, but I think it's really important for you to, for all of us, to create accountability for our prophetic words. We have to be. Listen, if we're going to create a prophetic community where we're judging prophetic words, ours have to be the first ones to be judged.
Yeah.
And so I really do believe in that. I do really understand that you can miss it. I have missed it. I don't want to be falsely humble and say I've missed it many times. It's not true. I've missed it though, and I've missed them. I've missed a couple of really, really big ones, which is really, really painful. So enough that it stings, and enough that it's like it's not been like, oh yeah, you're gonna, I see you as a doctor. Oh, you don't want to be a doctor. Okay, well, it did not affect. I mean, I've done some things that were like more pretty destructive by accident, not on purpose. Mm-hmm. So that's painful. I think cleaning up your mess, like being committed to clean up your mess is really important. Absolutely. Defending yourself is a bad plan. One of the things I've noticed, now let me say this, people have thought I was wrong way more than I was actually wrong. Yep. And what I mean by that is not defending myself. Like they say, hey, you gave me this word. Some people, you give them the word and they're processing it like it's a word of knowledge. Mm-hmm. They think, just as an example, you call them, I see you as a nurse. And they're like, oh, I'm not a nurse. I'm sorry you got that word wrong. And they're not understanding that prophecy is always about the future. So sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Yeah. And then sometimes they come and they'll say, you shared this and that's really not my heart. It's really da-da-da. I'm like, and I always go and exactly do what we teach our students to do. I go, I am really sorry. Would you forgive me? I would never try to manipulate you with prophecy. Yeah. I really probably just missed it on that one. And so, we'll say and forgive, all of our stuff. And then many times, 2 years later, catch me in a conference. You know that word, remember I came up and told you it was wrong? Yeah, well that exact thing happened to me. Now, I'm not saying that's happened all the time, but it's happened many, many, many times. And what I tell our teams and what we believe is if you humble yourself when someone corrects you, they will commonly come and tell you when they're wrong. Yeah. But if you defend yourself, I don't know how many times that they'll never come back, even if it was right. So we make mistakes. The chapter on false prophets, by the way, in your book, the School of the Prophets, there's a chapter on false prophets in there. You should read it because it talks about what a false prophet isn't. And it talks about times when people in the Bible actually got words wrong and they weren't called false prophets because they got the word wrong. Yep. And so I think it's really important. It's really important that we don't punish people in our culture who get words wrong, because then they will feel very prompted to defend themselves because they understand. It's kind of like this when people, sometimes I think when people lie a lot, like, my son always lies. Well, what's the punishment for him telling the truth? Sometimes the punishment's so severe that he's going to lie. And it doesn't make it okay. It just says, I know why people lie around you. The punishment for being wrong is so huge. Mm. So it's like we have to make sure that we don't punish people when they get it wrong so that they feel like they have to defend themselves when they did get it wrong, So those are things I think about.
That's so good. Thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our Q&A time. Let's just honor these fathers in the prophetic.